Listen guys, before the video starts, hit that subscribe button because today's story is going to keep you hooked till the very end. Smash that like button right now because this story is going to change how you think. So friends, I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me pretty recently. This is a story about a very famous actor who was stopped from sitting on his own private jet. Yeah, you heard that right. On his own plane. And from this, I learned that you should never judge anyone by their looks or their clothes. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. And share this video with someone who needs to hear this story today. You know what? In all my years, and trust me, there have been many of them, I've learned that life has a really weird sense of humor. It throws surprises at you when you least expect them. It teaches you lessons in the strangest places. And it reminds you of who you really are exactly when you've forgotten. Today, I want to share with you something that happened to me not too long ago. Something that taught me a deep lesson about making assumptions about respect and about the dangerous game of judging people just by how they look on the outside. It was a Tuesday morning. I remember because Tuesdays have always felt like that forgotten middle child of the week, you know? It's not Monday with all its fresh energy and optimism. It's not yet close enough to the weekend to get excited. It's just Tuesday. Anyway, I had just finished a business meeting in New York, one of those super boring meetings where everyone talks in circles for 3 whole hours when they could have just sent an email instead and saved everyone's time. Hit that like button if you've ever been in a boring meeting like that. My assistant had arranged for me to fly back to California on one of the company jets. Now, let me explain something here. When I say company jet, I mean a jet that I personally own, that my own production company operates for business purposes. It's mine. But here's the interesting thing. I had never actually been on this particular airplane before. We had bought it about 6 months earlier, and this was going to be my very first time flying on it. So I was kind of excited, you know? I showed up at the private terminal at Teterboro Airport, which is in New Jersey near New York. And I was dressed the way I always dress when I'm traveling, just comfortable, casual clothes. I had on my favorite old jeans, a simple button-down shirt, a weathered brown leather jacket that I've probably had for about 20 years now, and my old baseball cap that I love wearing. I wasn't trying to make any kind of statement or impression. I wasn't trying to hide who I was either. I was just being me, which is something I've always believed is the only real, authentic way to move through this world. I had a small carry-on bag with me, nothing fancy or expensive looking. And I walked up to the plane with that quiet excitement you get when you're about to fly home after being away for a while. You know that feeling? The stairs were down, so I climbed aboard and stepped inside. Comment below if you've ever flown on a private jet. Or would you want to? The interior of this plane was absolutely beautiful, guys. It had cream-colored leather seats that looked super comfortable, polished with accents that gave it a classy look, and that specific new airplane smell mixed with expensive upholstery. I had seen photos when we purchased it, but seeing it in person was something completely different. It was stunning. I just stood there for a moment, taking it all in, admiring what we had bought, when suddenly I heard a voice behind me. Excuse me, sir. Sir, can I help you? I turned around to see a flight attendant standing there. She was a woman probably in her early 30s, with blonde hair pulled back super tight in a bun, wearing a very crisp uniform that looked like it had been ironed until it was absolutely perfect. And she had this particular expression on her face. You know the one I'm talking about? That special blend of suspicion and disapproval that people wear when they've already decided in their minds that you don't belong somewhere. Like you're in the wrong place and shouldn't be there. I'm good, thanks, I said, giving her a polite, friendly nod. Just getting settled in. I'm sorry, but I'm going to need to see your boarding credentials, she said, and her voice was sharp and very official sounding. This is a private charter flight, and we have specific passengers on the manifest list. Share this video right now, because what happens next is crazy. Now, here's where I made my first mistake. I just assumed, that my assistant had communicated everything properly to the crew. I assumed that the crew of my own airplane, the plane I personally own, would know who owned it. Silly me, right? That was a bad assumption on my part. So I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone, thinking I'd just show her the confirmation email or something that would clear this whole confusion up quickly and easily. "My name is Clint Eastwood," I said calmly and politely. "I believe I'm on your passenger list." She looked at me like I had just told her I was the King of England or the President of Mars or something equally ridiculous. Her eyes went wide, and she had this look of complete disbelief on her face. "Sir, the passenger list doesn't have anyone by that name," she said, looking at her tablet. "And regardless, this seat you're standing near," she gestured dramatically to one of the large, first-class style seats in the forward cabin near the front. "That's reserved for our primary passenger, our VIP. You'll need to move to the rear of the aircraft, to the back." I'll be completely honest with you guys, I was taken aback. I wasn't angry yet, just really confused. Like, what was happening here? "I think there might be some confusion," I said, keeping my voice calm and even. "This is my plane. Well, my company's plane. I'm the owner." Hit that subscribe button if you can't believe what you're hearing. The look she gave me right then, I'll never, ever forget it. It was pure, complete skepticism mixed with what I can only describe as this patronizing amusement. Like she thought I was joking or crazy or both. She actually smiled, but it wasn't a friendly, warm smile at all. It was a kind of cold smile you give to a little child who's just told you an obvious lie, like when they say they didn't eat the cookies even though there's chocolate all over their face. "Sir, I'm going to need you to take a seat in the back," she said firmly, "or I'm going to have to ask you to deplane, to get off the aircraft. We don't have time for games. Our actual passenger will be arriving shortly, and everything needs to be perfectly ready." "I am the actual passenger," I said, and I could feel the first stirrings of frustration starting to bubble up inside me. "Look, just call your operations manager or check with whoever handles the flight schedules. This is registration number." "Sir, I'm not calling anyone," she interrupted me sharply. "What I'm going to do is escort you to the appropriate section of the aircraft, the back section where you belong." Now, at this exact point, I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs behind me, and a man in a pilot's uniform appeared in the doorway. He was younger, maybe late 20s, with that particular swagger that some young guys get when they think wearing a uniform automatically makes them more important and powerful than they actually are. He sized up the whole situation immediately, or at least he thought he did. Drop a like if you think this situation is getting out of control. "Everything okay here, Jennifer?" he asked the flight attendant. But his eyes were locked on me, and they definitely weren't friendly eyes. They were suspicious, almost hostile. "This gentleman," Jennifer said, and I caught the way she emphasized the word gentleman like it was a word that didn't quite fit me, like I wasn't really a gentleman at all, "is claiming he owns the aircraft, and he's refusing to follow my instructions." The pilot actually laughed. It was a short, barking kind of laugh that echoed around in the cabin, bouncing off the walls. "Buddy," he said to me, shaking his head, "I don't know what kind of scam you're running here or what kind of crazy you are, but you need to get off this aircraft right now. We're preparing for departure, and you're trespassing on private property. You're breaking the law." "I'm not trespassing," I said, and I could hear my own voice getting that particular edge it gets when I'm trying very, very hard to stay patient and not lose my temper. "I own this plane. My name is Clint Eastwood. My production company, Malpaso Productions, purchased this Gulfstream jet 6 months ago. If you would just make one simple phone call. Comment below if you would have stayed calm in this situation. Clint Eastwood." The pilot looked at Jennifer, and they both started grinning, actually smiling and laughing like I had just told them the funniest joke they'd ever heard in their entire lives. "Sir," the pilot said, try not to laugh out loud, "I don't know if you're mentally unwell or if this is some kind of prank or joke, but Clint Eastwood is a very famous actor and director. You look nothing like him. And even if you did, what would Clint Eastwood be doing showing up alone with no security guards, no entourage, no assistants, dressed like," he gestured at my clothes with a dismissive wave of his hand, "like he just rolled out of a Goodwill thrift store." That comment stung. I won't lie to you. It actually hurt a little bit. Not because I cared what they thought of my clothes. I really didn't care about that at all. But because of what that comment revealed about their assumptions, about their thinking, about how they thought success should look, how wealth should present itself, how a person of importance should behave and dress and act. They had this picture in their minds of what an important, successful person looks like, and I didn't fit that picture at all. How I dress is my own business, I said quietly, keeping my voice low and controlled. And I don't travel with an entourage because I'm not that kind of person. I'm a private person who likes to travel simply. Now for the last time, please contact your operations center and verify who owns this aircraft. Just make one phone call. That's all I'm asking. Share this with someone who's ever been judged by their appearance. The pilot stepped closer to me, and his whole demeanor, his whole attitude shifted from amused to actually threatening. He was trying to intimidate me now. Okay, pal. Time's up. You've got about 10 seconds to walk off this plane voluntarily, on your own, or I'm calling airport security and having you arrested for trespassing and for impersonating. Hell, I don't even know what to charge you with. Impersonating a celebrity? Being delusional? Being crazy. Jennifer, the flight attendant, chimed in, clearly feeling emboldened and empowered by the pilot's aggressive stance. Honestly, the nerve of some people, she said, shaking her head in disgust. You know how many crazy people try to sneak onto private jets thinking they can just walk on and claim they own the place? We're trained for this. We're specifically trained to spot people like you. People like me. That phrase just hung there in the air. People like me. Someone who didn't look the part they expected. Someone who didn't perform wealth and success the way they thought it should be performed. I'm going to tell you one more time, I said, and my voice had dropped to that very quiet register that people who know me well understand means I'm about done with this nonsense, and I'm getting seriously frustrated. Make the phone call. Verify the owner of this aircraft. It will take you exactly 2 minutes. 2 minutes of your time. The pilot pulled out his phone from his pocket. For just a moment, I actually thought maybe he was going to do it. Maybe he was going to make that call and verify who I was. But instead, he said, I'm calling security. You've had your chance, buddy. Hit that like button if you think they're making a huge mistake. Jake, wait, Jennifer said suddenly, and there was something different in her voice now. She was looking down at her tablet, scrolling through something on the screen. Hold on just a second. What? Jake, the pilot, asked, sounding irritated that she was interrupting his power play. What is it? The registration number. Let me just... She was tapping frantically on her screen, and I could see her face starting to change from confident and certain to confused and uncertain. The owner of registration November 843 Charlie Echo is listed as... Her voice trailed off. The color was literally draining from her face like someone had pulled a plug. Listed as what? Jake demanded impatiently. What does it say? Malpaso Productions, she whispered, her voice barely audible now. Malpaso Productions, President and CEO. She looked up at me with absolute horror in her eyes. Oh God, no. This can't be happening. Jake grabbed the tablet right out of her hands and stared at the screen. I watched his face go through the most remarkable transformation I've ever seen, from aggressive confidence to confusion to dawning realization to absolute, complete horror. It was like watching a time-lapse video of someone's entire career imploding and exploding right in front of their eyes. Comment OPS if you think they just realized their mistake. Sir, Jake started to say, his voice shaking, but I held up my hand to stop him. Don't, I said simply, quietly. Just don't. For a long, long moment, nobody spoke. The cabin of that beautiful airplane had gone completely, utterly silent except for the soft humming sound of the auxiliary power unit in the background. Jennifer had gone pale, almost ghost white, and her hand was covering her mouth in shock. Jake was staring at the tablet like it contained the secrets of the entire universe, or maybe like it was his own professional death warrant that he was reading. Sir, Mr. Eastwood. We didn't. Jennifer was stammering now, struggling to form complete sentences. All that confident authority, all that certainty she had displayed just minutes ago, had completely evaporated like water on a blazing hot skillet. You didn't recognize me, I said flatly, stating the obvious fact. That's fine. That's actually not the problem here at all. Then, what is the problem? Jake started to ask, but I cut him off before he could finish. Share this video, because the lesson here is so important. The problem, I said, speaking slowly and clearly so they would understand every single word, is that you both made assumptions. You looked at how I was dressed. You saw that I arrived completely alone. You noticed that I didn't act like your idea, your mental picture of what an important person should act like. And based on all of that, you decided I was nobody. Actually, worse than nobody, you decided I was a problem that needed to be removed. A crazy person. A scammer. A liar. Someone to be mocked and laughed at and treated with contempt. Sir, we're trained to be cautious, to be careful about security, Jennifer tried to explain, but her voice was weak and unconvincing now. Cautious is asking for identification, I said firmly. Cautious is politely verifying credentials and checking the passenger list carefully. What you did wasn't cautious. What you did was judge, dismiss, and humiliate. And when I gave you multiple opportunities, several chances, to simply make one phone call to verify what I was telling you, you chose mockery instead. You chose aggression instead. You chose to laugh at me instead of listening to me. Jake set the tablet down very carefully on a seat, like it might explode if he moved it too quickly. Mr. Eastwood, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, I apologize. I sincerely, deeply apologize. We made a terrible, terrible mistake, and... You made several terrible mistakes, I interrupted, because I wanted to make this point crystal clear. But the biggest mistake, the worst one, wasn't about me personally. I'm old enough and I've been around long enough that a little embarrassment doesn't really hurt me anymore. I'll go home tonight, have a good laugh about this whole ridiculous situation with my family, and move on with my life. I'll be fine. Hit subscribe, because what he says next is powerful. But what about the next person? I continued, looking directly at both of them. What about someone who isn't famous like me? Someone who doesn't own the plane? Someone who is exactly who they say they are, but who doesn't meet your narrow expectations of how they should look or act or dress? How do you treat them? Do you mock them too? Do you threaten them with arrest too? The question just hung there in the air between us. Neither of them had an answer. They both just stood there, looking at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. I've worked with flight crews before, I continued. Good ones. Professional ones. Crews who understand that safety and security don't require humiliation. That verification doesn't require condescension and talking down to people. That doing your job properly doesn't mean looking down on people who you've decided aren't worth your respect. Mr. Eastwood, please, Jennifer said, and I could see there were actual tears forming in her eyes now. Please, this job, it's everything to me. I've worked so hard to get here, to get this position. I made a mistake. A terrible, horrible mistake. But please don't. Don't what? I asked. Don't hold you accountable for your actions. Don't expect professional behavior from people in professional positions. Comment below if you think they deserve a second chance or not. Jake stepped forward then, and he looked absolutely devastated. Sir, if anyone should be held responsible, if anyone should face consequences, it should be me. I'm the pilot in command. I escalated the situation. I was aggressive and unprofessional. Jennifer was just following my lead, taking her cues from me. That's not true, Jennifer said quickly, shaking her head. That's not fair to say. I started it. I made the first judgment. I was dismissive and rude from the very moment you walked on board, Mr. Eastwood. Jake was just backing me up, trying to support his crew member. I looked at them both carefully. They were young people. They had careers ahead of them. They were probably actually good at their jobs most of the time. Now they were facing serious consequences for one bad day and really terrible judgment. Here's what we're going to do, I said finally, after thinking about it for a moment. We're not taking off today. This flight is canceled. Sir. Jake looked confused, not understanding what I meant. I'm grounding this plane right now, I explained. We're not flying anywhere today. Not with this crew. Not after what just happened. But the meeting you have in California, Jennifer started to say. Drop a like if you would have done the same thing. I'll take a commercial flight, I said simply. Or I'll have another aircraft brought around from somewhere else. But I'm not flying on a plane where the crew has demonstrated such poor judgment and unprofessional behavior. Not today. Not right now. I pulled out my phone and dialed my operations manager directly. He picked up on the second ring, like he always does. "John, it's Clint," I said. "I'm at the Gulfstream at Teterboro Airport. We've had a situation here. A serious situation." I spent the next 5 minutes explaining exactly what had happened, going through every detail of the encounter. John, to his credit, was absolutely mortified. He apologized over and over again, said there had been a communication breakdown somewhere in the system, that the crew absolutely should have been properly briefed on who the passenger was, that this whole thing was completely unacceptable. "John," I said, "I want you to arrange alternate transportation for me as soon as possible. And then I want you to handle the personnel situation here with the appropriate level of seriousness. This needs to be dealt with properly." When I hung up the phone, both Jennifer and Jake were standing there looking like they had just watched their entire futures disintegrate right before their eyes. They looked absolutely crushed. "Mr. Eastwood," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper, trembling slightly. Are we fired? Is this it for us? Share this video to show people how important respect is." I thought about it. I really, genuinely thought about it for a moment. These two people had misjudged me badly. Yes, that was true. They had been unprofessional. Absolutely, no question about that. But were they malicious, evil people? Were they dangerous? Were they completely irredeemable? Beyond hope? I didn't think so. "That's not my decision to make directly," I said honestly. "My operations manager will conduct a proper, thorough review of what happened here today. He'll speak with you both individually, get your side of the story, hear your perspectives, and make a determination about your future with this company. That's his job, not mine." "But," Jennifer started. "But I'll tell you what I'm going to tell him," I continued. They both waited, hardly breathing, hanging on my every word. "I'm going to tell him that you both demonstrated very poor judgment today, that you showed unprofessional behavior, and that you displayed a troubling willingness to make snap assumptions about people based purely on their appearance. That's the truth, and those are serious problems in any service industry, but especially in aviation where people's actual safety is at stake." Jake nodded slowly, still looking at the floor. Jennifer wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "Hit that subscribe button because the ending will surprise you." "But," I said, and they both looked up at me hopefully, "I'm also going to tell him that when you realized your mistake, when you understood what you had done, you didn't make excuses. You didn't try to blame each other or throw each other under the bus. In fact, you both tried to take responsibility and protect the other person from consequences. That speaks to character. It speaks to the kind of people you might actually be deep down when you're not making terrible choices." "So what does that mean?" Jennifer asked, her voice small and uncertain. "What does that mean for us?" "It means," I said slowly, "that if this was truly an anomaly, if this isn't how you normally treat people, if you're willing to genuinely learn from this experience and truly change how you approach your jobs and how you interact with passengers, then maybe, just maybe, there's a path forward for you. Maybe there's a possibility of keeping your jobs. But that's not my call to make. That's between you and John. And you're going to have to prove that you deserve a second chance. You're going to have to show it through your actions, not just your words." I picked up my bag from where I had set it down and headed for the door. As I reached the top of the stairs, about to go down, I turned back one more time to look at them. Comment respect if you learned something from this story. You know what the real lesson is here. I asked them. It's not about treating famous people with respect. It's not about being extra careful because someone might turn out to be important or powerful or wealthy. It's about treating everyone, every single person you encounter, with basic human dignity, regardless of whether they can affect your job or your life or your career. I paused, making sure they were really listening and understanding. That old guy in the worn jacket and baseball cap might own the plane, sure. That's what happened today. But even if he was just a maintenance worker who had wandered onto the plane by mistake, he still deserved courtesy. He still deserved the benefit of the doubt. He still deserved to be treated like a human being whose presence and claims were worth verifying before being mocked and laughed at. Every person deserves that basic level of respect. Every single person. I walked down the stairs across the tarmac. That's the paved area where planes park, and into the terminal building. John had already arranged for a commercial flight for me, first class on United Airlines, leaving in about 2 hours. Perfect timing, actually. I sat down in the private terminal lounge, which was quiet and comfortable, and got myself a cup of really terrible coffee from the machine. And I just sat there thinking about what had just happened, replaying it all in my mind. Share this video with your family and friends right now. The truth is, guys, I wasn't even angry anymore. I was disappointed, maybe. Tired, definitely. But mostly I was thinking about all the times in my own life when I had made assumptions about people. Times when I had judged someone based on how they looked, or how they talked, or how they carried themselves. Times when I decided I knew who someone was before I had taken the actual time to find out. Times when I was wrong about people. We all do it, you know? Every single one of us. It's human nature. It's pattern recognition, survival instinct, whatever fancy name you want to call it. Our brains are wired to make quick judgments to keep us safe. But that doesn't make it right. And when you're in a position of authority, when you're wearing a uniform or representing a company or holding any kind of power over someone else's experience, you have an even bigger responsibility to rise above those natural instincts. You have to verify before you judge. You have to question your own assumptions before you act on them. About a week later, John called me with an update on the situation. He had conducted his review, interviewed both Jennifer and Jake extensively and separately, checked their complete employment records going back to when they were hired, and talked to other crew members they had worked with to get a fuller picture of their normal behavior. His conclusion? They were both generally good employees who just had had a spectacularly, monumentally bad day. The communication breakdown about who the passenger was, about me being the owner, had set them on edge from the beginning. It had made them hypersensitive to security concerns, worried about doing their jobs perfectly. And they had let that worry and anxiety override their better judgment. They had let it cloud their thinking. Drop a like if you think everyone deserves a second chance. So, what are you recommending? I asked John. What should happen to them? Suspension without pay for 2 weeks, John said. Mandatory retraining on customer service protocols and implicit bias. That's unconscious prejudice. Written warnings that will go in their permanent employment files. And they're both on probation for 6 months. One more incident of any kind, anything even remotely similar, and they're terminated immediately. No questions asked. They're out. That seems fair, I said, nodding even though he couldn't see me over the phone. That seems like appropriate consequences that also give them a chance to learn and grow. There's something else, John added. They both asked if they could write you letters. Personal apology letters. I told them that wasn't necessary, that the matter was being handled professionally through proper channels. But they insisted. They really wanted to write to you directly. Do you want me to forward those letters to you if they send them? Sure, I said. Why not? I'll read them. The letters arrived at my office a few days later. Jennifer's letter was 3 pages long, handwritten very neatly on nice stationery paper. She apologized extensively, profusely, for everything that had happened. She explained that she had been stressed about some personal issues in her life, family problems, financial worries. She was very clear that she knew that wasn't an excuse, that it didn't justify her behavior at all. But she wanted me to understand the context. She wrote that she had spent the entire last week thinking really hard about her own biases and assumptions, really examining herself honestly. She talked about growing up in a wealthy family, about how she had been taught from a young age that successful, important people looked a certain way, acted a certain way, dressed a certain way. She realized now, after this incident, how toxic and damaging those lessons had been, how they had blinded her to the humanity in people who didn't fit that narrow mold, that limited picture she had in her head. Comment amen if this story touched your heart. Jake's letter was shorter, more direct, but no less sincere or heartfelt. He wrote about being a young pilot trying to prove himself in a competitive field, about feeling like he had to be aggressive and dominant to be seen as authoritative, to be respected, about confusing real respect with fear and intimidation. He said the incident with me had been a massive wake-up call for him, a turning point. That he had spent a lot of time since then thinking deeply about the kind of pilot he wanted to be, and, more importantly, the kind of person he wanted to be. Both letters ended with what sounded like very genuine apologies and sincere commitments to do better, to be better, to learn from this experience and never let it happen again. I believe them. Not because I'm naive or gullible or a pushover, but because I've lived long enough, more than 8 decades now, to know that people really can change. That sometimes the absolute worst moments in our lives, our biggest failures and mistakes, become the catalyst for genuine growth and transformation. Sometimes our failures teach us more than our successes ever could. I wrote them both back, short notes, nothing too fancy or elaborate. I thanked them for their apologies and told them I accepted them sincerely. I said I hoped they would take the lessons from this experience and use them to become better at their jobs and better in their lives overall. To let this be a turning point, not an ending. Share this video with someone who judges people by their appearance. Now, you might be sitting there wondering why I'm telling you this whole long story. What's the point? What's the lesson I'm trying to teach beyond just don't be rude to people who might turn out to be your boss? Because it's much deeper than that. Here's what I learned from this experience, or maybe what I was reminded of. Because I think deep down I knew it already, but had kind of forgotten over time. We live in a world that's increasingly divided into simple categories. Rich and poor, famous and unknown, worthy and unworthy, important and unimportant. We make these determinations, these judgments, in literal seconds based on superficial characteristics, clothes, accent, posture, confidence level. And then we treat people accordingly, very differently based on which category we've mentally put them in. We give respect freely to those we think deserve it, and we withhold it completely from those we think don't deserve it. But that's completely backwards. That's the wrong way to think about it. Respect isn't something that should have to be earned through wealth or fame or appearance or status. Basic human respect, the kind that says I see you as a fellow human being who is worthy of dignity and consideration. That should be the default setting. That should be the starting point for every single interaction we have with another person. Not something people have to prove they deserve. Hit that like button if you agree with this message. Everything that happened on that airplane that Tuesday morning happened because 2 people forgot that fundamental truth. They saw someone who didn't fit their mental expectations, their preconceived notions, and they automatically assumed he was less than. They assumed he was a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed, rather than a person to be helped and treated with dignity. And here's the really uncomfortable part that I had to face myself. I've done the exact same thing. Maybe not in that specific situation, maybe not to that extreme degree, but I have made snap judgments about people. I have treated people differently based on how they looked or talked or carried themselves. I've assumed I knew someone's entire story before I'd heard even a single word of it. I've been guilty of the same kind of prejudice and assumption. This experience at the airport reminded me, forced me, to slow down in my interactions with people, to ask questions before making assumptions, to remember that the universe has a really ironic sense of humor about these things. And sometimes, often actually, the person you're casually dismissing or judging or looking down on is exactly the person you should be listening to most carefully. The person who has something important to teach you. I think about Jennifer and Jake sometimes, even now. I wonder if they managed to keep their jobs long-term. If they really learned the lessons they said they learned in those heartfelt letters. If they treat people differently now, with more respect and dignity. I genuinely hope so. I really do hope that one uncomfortable, embarrassing encounter became a genuine turning point for them, the way it became an important reminder for me. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters. Whether we learn and grow from our mistakes or just repeat them. Comment below what lesson you learned from this story. Because, at the end of the day, we're all just people. Just human beings trying to make our way through life. Some of us have more money than others. Some have more fame, more power, more status, more advantages. But strip all that external stuff away, the money, the fame, the titles, the possessions, and we're all just trying to make it through each day with our dignity intact. We all want fundamentally the same things. We all want to be seen for who we really are. We want to be heard when we speak. We want to be respected. We want to matter. We want our existence to count for something. The next time you're in a position of authority, any kind of authority, big or small, the next time you're making a judgment about someone based primarily on how they look or how they act or how they present themselves, I want you to ask yourself some honest questions. Am I really seeing this person clearly? Am I seeing them as they actually are or as I assume they must be? Am I giving them the benefit of the doubt? Am I treating them the way I would want to be treated if our positions were reversed? If I were in their shoes, how would I want to be spoken to? And if the answer to any of those questions is no, if you realize you're not seeing clearly, not being fair, not treating someone right, then stop. Take a breath. Take a step back. Make the phone call to verify. Ask the clarifying question. Check your assumption before acting on it. Give people the basic dignity of being seen for who they actually are, not who you've decided in your mind they must be based on superficial factors. Share this video right now with everyone you know, because someday, and this is absolutely guaranteed, someday you might be the one walking onto that airplane or into that building or that store in comfortable, casual clothes. Maybe having a bad day. Maybe not looking the part that people expect based on their stereotypes and assumptions. Maybe being judged unfairly. And in that moment, when you're on the receiving end of that judgment, you'll desperately hope that someone extends to you the same grace, the same benefit of the doubt, the same basic human respect that you've been extending to others throughout your life. That's the real lesson from my day at Teterboro Airport. That's what I learned from being denied a seat on my own airplane by my own crew. Not that people should automatically recognize me because I'm famous. Not that fame or wealth should grant special treatment or privileges, but that everyone, every single person, from the CEO to the janitor, from the pilot to the passenger, deserves to be treated with basic human respect and dignity. No exceptions. It's actually a pretty simple lesson when you break it down, really. But simple doesn't mean easy, and it certainly doesn't mean unimportant. Sometimes the simplest truths are the most profound and the hardest to actually live by consistently. So the next time, and there will be a next time for all of us, the next time you're about to make an assumption about someone you've just met, pause for a second. Think about it. The next time you're about to treat someone as less than because they don't meet your expectations or fit your mental picture of how someone important should look or act, remember this story. Remember that you might be looking at the actual owner of the plane, or you might be looking at someone who deserves your respect regardless of whether they own anything at all. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our stories. Drop a comment telling us what you think. Share this with 5 friends right now. And most importantly, treat everyone you meet today with the respect and dignity they deserve as a fellow human being. Thank you so much for watching till the very end. If this story changed how you think, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with everyone who needs to hear it. See you in the next one. God bless.